beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America.
Hey everybody, it is Monday, May 13th. Thank you for joining for Immediate Release. This is Bill O'Reilly and I am joined by my guest host Liz Neuerfeld. How are you tonight, Liz?
I'm great, Billy, other than I'm sad that Doris Day has passed away. I know she lived a wonderful 97 years, but it's terrible to lose someone like that. But I'm well. I'm good.
I know every time someone from that generation dies, I figure that's the last of the generation. And then then there's a Doris Day that goes and you said, oh no, exactly. I mean, who could be nicer than Doris Day? I hope she was in real life, but she certainly seemed so on all the movies and television shows over the years. That is very sad.
I know. It's funny, she bring that up about another person dying of that generation. It's like that game you play sometimes at dinner parties, Dead or Alive. You can't remember some of these folks, how old they are, where are they? But she's special. I've always thought that my sister Christine was a lot like Doris Day.
Oh, is that right? Well, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Classic, and always so sunny and dignified and gracious. And she's like Audrey Hepburn too. But I love Doris Day. Anyway, what a treat she was.
Right. But I guess what is the stock market now? We're taping a little bit early for anyone listening live tonight. I think it was down 650 the last time I saw, and it may have closed at that.
Yep. Well, they said it was the lowest since May 2016. I'm looking now. I don't know. It's not a surprise though, right? Not a surprise.
Not a surprise. And you know what? I don't think it, I think numbers like that don't even matter that much anymore. The market is so high. I remember in 1989, in October 89, when it dropped 500 points and like the world was over. And I guess it's all relative, but I assume I hope Trump knows what he's doing. I think it's certainly time the Chinese got their due. You just hope it doesn't spiral out of control.
No, that's true. And it's interesting. I don't know what the latest polling is on this or public reaction. I've been watching CNBC or had that on most of the day. But generally speaking, there's a lot of support just for the ideas that what you just said, which is enough is enough. I mean, now what that translates to for the average guy, the farmers and the manufacturers and Americans all across the country remains to be seen. But this is not unexpected. Frankly, quite the opposite. It's actually something that Trump campaigned on. Just getting tough with the Chinese. And he's given them ample warning, that's for sure. So, the market dip is no surprise. But I don't know how long this can go on. I know the president did say today that he's going to see President Xi and also Putin next month at the G20. So I guess this will be topic number 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and everyone keeps talking about, I think Trump is kind of rubbing it in today, and everyone talks about, the face, like, in China, face, like, they can't lose face. I'm a little tired of face, we all have pride, and, I understand that it's a cultural thing, but it's, it's hardball, and you know how I feel about this president, but I don't mind the hardball here. But it will, you're right, it will cost people money. Funny, I bought a jacket about a month ago from Scotland. And I thought it was going to arrive like on a Tuesday, and I got a notice from DHL that said, it's at the airport and we need to pay, 40 some odd dollars or whatever it is for the tariff. We'll pay it. You have to cover it. Give us the credit card thing. And I'd never seen that before. And it was like, wow. So that's how it works.
Yeah.
It was pretty, I figured it'd be built in or something, but I actually had to, come up with a credit card to allow them to bring the thing into the U.S. It was a nice jacket.
It's interesting because I didn't realize they were opposing. When did this happen?
This happened maybe a month ago, 3 weeks or a month ago, something like that.
You sure it wasn't a scam?
No, it wasn't a scam. It was directly from DHL, and I had to give them the thing. It definitely wasn't a scam, and it was because I guess we've imposed tariffs on some of the EU countries as well. And so it was a leather jacket, and I wonder if one of the tariffs was on leather. It must have been. And I was going to go complain, and then I thought, you know what, I could just as well have bought American leather. So maybe it's like, good for me. I mean, I buy American cars and American when I can, but I just love this jacket. And but the tariff was a direct add-on. They let you know that you were paying that tariff, and it wasn't coming from the company.
Well, you told me about that jacket, by the way. This goes with your Vespa. This is your whole look.
This could be it. Whole new life.
We'll go on that.
56 and going, or 55 and going.
So I saw your column today on Biden, and you're in the Biden camp.
I'm in the Biden camp, not, and I may vote, if there's a third party out there, I may go for a third party person. And, I am a Republican, or at least a conservative, but I think I think for the Democrats, the column was originally called, an open letter to Democrats. And it was basically suggesting that they stick with Biden. They need to clear that field out and stop trashing the guy. I mean, I'm not in their camp, they may not want to listen to me. I don't work for them. I work for the Republicans, but I think he's their best bet by far. And if they screw it up, they'll screw it up. But and I'm not saying that other candidates can't win, but I think Biden is their safe pick just because he's safe. He's old. He's not going to go nuts. He's stable to some extent, to the extent that Joe Biden can be. And that was the advice was to stick with Joe.
Well, it's interesting. I was just talking to a very active Democrat in my in the village yesterday, one of our former mayors, actually, about who she favors in the primary and what she thinks. And there's no question that this whole idea of what AOC is doing to influence the broader agenda is really, it's bothering a lot of rank and file Democrats around the country. And, Biden, the idea that, she could come out and slam Biden 5 minutes after he came out with his own climate policy. Well, I guess it's really his agenda. The same way she came out and slammed Beto O'Rourke for his too. Just both of them say that they're not aggressive enough, that they're too timid.
Right.
It's not helping the party. It's just not.
It's not helping the party. And I mean, not that we care that much about the Democratic Party, but the, but that, I also thought that was a bit of a mistake for Biden. And that's what we talked about this last week, where I think it's an error for Biden to go out there and try and put out papers or match paper for paper with every other candidate, or go out there and campaign town by town with every other candidate. He's able to rise above that because of his stature and age and experience. And all he's going to do, he's just putting out a track of things to attack. And I don't think he needs a climate plan. He could just say we're going to move forward with very general type of stuff, because every time he does something, he's going to get picked apart by the far left, and there's no reason for it.
No, and I actually think in his case, and I don't usually say this, it's enough for him to just say, "Well, this president's doing nothing." And that's not enough. And he can.
That's right.
That could be his platform, because he, as we all know, what he's really running on is, I'm the most electable of our whole, this whole primary slate. So I couldn't agree with you more. Why get into the weeds on any of this stuff?
On anything whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
It's like the apology tour on Anita Hill. It's enough. My kids don't even know anything about Anita Hill, and they're all voters. They're and they're in their 20s and 30s.
It's also like it's at some point in a campaign, if you're not putting out intelligent material, white papers or policy positions, et cetera, the press starts to get on you for not being substantive. Where's the substance? Where's the substance? But that doesn't start for someone like Joe Biden until, next August, because he's been in for so long. You basically know what he stands for. You've got his voting record to deal with. It's not like you're an unknown coming in, where you get caught, without revealing anything. He's a known quantity. I really think it's a terrible mistake. I think it's really not that anyone from his campaign is going to listen to me, but I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it.
And do you think he's running his own, he's making these decisions himself, or he's getting pushed, or what? My understanding is that there are a lot of old Clinton people on his team right now, which is interesting, because never had any sense that, at the top, Biden and Hillary Clinton were particularly close. But, the Clinton posse has gone in, and boy, oh boy, this reeks of Hillary Clinton.
It would completely make sense if it's the Clinton posse. You're right, and not the Obama posse. Not that there's not some overlap between the two posses, but it's Biden. He's a liberal, but he's center left. He's not left. And the Clintons were, regardless of some positions they took over the years, they were center left as well. And this is a fit that matches that. That design. I think you're probably right. And I think he's got a little bit of a mishmash of advisors. He didn't even come out of the chute that well. He postponed a couple of early videos, and there was some, talk going on there in the press. I'm sure there were hits from other campaigns that were trying to make him look disorganized, but it didn't seem to matter. That's why I think it's so interesting with Biden and I think that's why he's potentially so strong. Not that he can't tank. I mean, anybody can tank, but even with the touchy-feely stuff and the Me Too hits that he took, plus, not the most, aesthetically beautiful rollout, he's still 32 points ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think it's just pure, and that's what the column asks really is Biden 30 plus points ahead because of his name ID and because he's been around for 36 years, elected as a senator and then vice president for 8, or is it because he's a safe candidate and electable, and hopefully for the Democrats, if you're a Democrat, you'd hope it's the latter. Because if it's name ID, the other ones are going to pick up name ID after the debates. A few televised debates. I mean, you're going to have, people do well in the first debate. Cory Booker may have a great line and move up for a week or two, but everyone's going to get better name ID. I tend to think, and I have nothing to base this on, that it's actually the wise voters among Democrats that are realizing that Biden's their best bet. Because as much as they want a minority, as much as they want a woman, as much as they want a real progressive, Biden's their best bet against Trump. I mean, he's beating Trump in polls in Arizona. And I'm not saying that he would beat Trump in Arizona, but in early polling, he's beating Trump in Arizona. And that's preposterous.
So one of the big, lines he comes out with, in every interview and every rally is that he wants to restore the soul of this country, and he wants to, and he's proud of the fact that he works with Republicans, or he has historically, on a whole range of issues, and that he really sees his role as being one of a uniter, that he can unite the country. And what he's tapping into is just the complete national exhaustion over divisiveness. And I guess my question would be: is that going to hurt him with the angry crowd among the Democratic primary voters? But if he gets past that, that in itself will be what gives him a win if he beats Trump.
Yeah, no, I think that's the exact right question, Liz. And it's, the Democratic primary voters are traditionally the most liberal among them, just as in the Republican Party, it's the most conservative voters are the most reliable that turn out in primaries. The question is whether the silent majority Democrats, and there were a lot of them, and they voted for Reagan, and they voted for Bill Clinton, and they voted for Richard Nixon. Those silent majority Democrats, those are Biden voters. And if they decide to turn out in the primary, I think Biden sweeps. I think Biden just rolls. If they don't turn out in the primary and let the younger voters decide, or the more activist voters decide, then other candidates would have a chance. But, I think it's the right message for Biden, and I'm sure they're pulling the living daylights out of it, but it's also a good message for Biden because it's true. That's who he is. And, despite the fact that he apologized for saying nice things about Republicans a few weeks ago, he's always been an institution guy, meaning, the institution of the Senate. And he always respected the culture of the Senate, respected the laws of the Senate, but also the kind of the unspoken Menschkeit, or whatever you would call it, between senators. There's a decorum that you have there, and I think that's missed by a lot of Americans. And I think a lot of Americans are concerned that the fundamentals are breaking down in Washington, whether they agree with Trump on any given issue or not. That's kind of a structural fear that that I think Biden could tap into and help allay. I think it's a good message. I really do.
And it seems like a very genuine message. He's not a great pit bull. You see him try it, and he's just not. When he's angry, and it's sort of in his reactions intuitive about something, that's one thing. But I think generally he really is more of a happy warrior.
Yeah. Did you ever run across him when you were down in the Reagan Bush administration? Did you have any interactions with him?
Not back then, but actually during my time in Autism Speaks, I had a chance to sit with him a couple of times in meetings where he was very focused on trying to get this international, a global version of the Americans with Disabilities Act passed.
Yep.
There was a coalition of disability groups he had pulled together to try to get the UN to pass to ratify a treaty that's still sitting there unratified.
Right.
And literally the document is the same as the ADA. And Bob Dole was supporting it, and George Herbert Walker Bush supported it, and George W. Bush supported it, and John Kerry, and on and on. But there's a group that there were a lot of, frankly, too many Republicans in the Senate refused to do it. They're and by the way, they hid behind the fact that they didn't want to tell other countries what to do, which is a whole separate show we could do. But I did work because the Biden knows Bob Wright, who I've worked for, as you know, for years. And so I went to represent Bob. And I have to tell you, he sat for an hour and a half around a round conference table twice when I was there with just maybe a dozen of us. Very informed, very committed, and also frankly, just a pleasure. Now, granted, those are limited. And then also when Congress passed and the president signed the ABLE Act, which I don't know if you know what that is. It's the equivalent of a 529 college savings account,
yep.
But with medical conditions. So, not everyone goes to college, right? So parents should be able to save money tax-free in a savings account for medical expenses or expenses associated with, their children with special needs as they get older. Those might be transportation, housing, or doctor's expenses. But there was no comparable account to the 529. So Biden was very supportive, and he hosted the signing ceremony, which I went to in the Indian Treaty Room. And he was a complete, he's a humanitarian. He's got a huge heart. And I don't agree with him on a lot of issues either. You and I could go right down the line, but I certainly think he's a very decent and true American.
Yeah, and I used to poke fun of him all the time, as a lot of us do, for, he has the Biden gaffes, which he's actually learned to limit over time. I think there's a story in the Times today or yesterday about that. But now he's looking pretty good. I've got to say, Liz, while we were talking about Joe Biden, we were joined by our guest today, who I hadn't properly introduced, and I had my timing a little bit off. And for our listeners, it is somebody that you're already familiar with. Tim Plekovich, who's calling in from Peoria, Illinois, is the author of Civil War Fathers, which I think we mentioned last time, and a book called Nuns, Nazis, and Notre Dame, which was graciously done on my father. And we spoke with Tim about the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival a few weeks ago with the founder of the festival. And Tim is on tonight to report about that, which is, if you don't know about it, it is the most, and I feel utterly confident in saying that it is the most extraordinary event in America, and virtually no one knows about it. And I whenever I talk to Tim about it, I get giddy. And Tim is right back. Tim, welcome back to for Immediate Release. Thank you for making time, taking time out of your day to report back on the festival. How's it going? How was it?
Well, doing well, Billy. Thank you so much for having me. It was just a wonderful event again. Billy, I can't do this justice in just trying to encapsulate in a few short minutes for you just how extraordinary this event is.
I was telling Tim, I was telling Liz about it before as we were getting ready for the show, and I'd never mentioned it to her before. And she was you were giddy too, right, Liz?
Oh, I can't wait to hear all about it, Tim. Thanks so much for taking the time. I missed you the last time you were on with Billy, so this is really a treat. So let's hear some good news.
Yeah. Tim, can you give us some color on how this started? Just for those that didn't get to listen the first time, can you just tell us how the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival was founded and what it's about?
Yeah, I will try to do the best that
you will
I can,
do well.
I'm not sure, Bill, just exactly when the festival had its genesis. I mean, from when the idea sprang. this Nicholas Inman, a minister in Southwest Missouri, it was his brainstorm. And I believe the first festival, when it actually came to fruition, Billy, I'm going to guess probably about 2005 or 2006. And it started as an event in which the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren of American presidents would all descend on this tiny town in southwest Missouri, Marshfield, Missouri, probably about 15, 20 miles east of Springfield, Missouri, probably a little more than an hour from Branson, Missouri, a place which attracts quite a few tourists. And so anyway, in the first few years of the festival, it didn't take long before this really started to catch on. And now you have a cornucopia of presidential offspring who make sure that they attend this festival on a regular basis. Some of the regulars, Billy, would include George Cleveland, who, by the way, has charge of the pie auction every year
I
on
love
Friday
it.
night. And
Yeah.
George Cleveland, actually the grandson of of Grover Cleveland. I would say George is probably in his late 60s. If you do the math, it doesn't seem to add up. It doesn't seem that this could be possible, but it is. And Grover Cleveland and his grandson both sired children at a very late time in their lives. Had a chance, Billy, a wonderful lunch with Rutherford B. Hayes's great-granddaughter the other day, and just a delightful woman who is mayor of her town in Rosemead, California, but she always takes a break from her mayoral duties to make the trek back to Marshfield. Ran into one of the halls with Harry Truman's grandson, Clifton Daniel, the other day, who put on just a magnificent performance of a play concerning his grandfather. And Billy, this was something I believe that was on Broadway about 45 years ago. I think the title of the play is "Give 'Em Hell, Harry."
Love it.
Mary Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower's granddaughter, that would be John's daughter, was in attendance and took part in about 3 different events. A couple of World War II symposiums, just did a magnificent job. I ran into a great grandson of James Monroe, who had his daughter with her. And that was kind of interesting because, Liz, you'll like this. We were talking. I was talking to the great granddaughter about what it's like having James Monroe for an ancestor. And I said, what do your classmates think about it? And she said, well, I brought that up one time to one of my teachers. They live in rural Baltimore. And she said, I brought it up to one of my teachers one time in front of the class. And a couple of the kids just kind of uttered, "Oh, whatever." So really is interesting. But Billy, we're not even scratching the surface. There are so many people of historical significance who attend this festival every year, in addition to the presidential offspring. For instance, I was on a Civil War panel with Rutherford B. Hayes's great-granddaughter. That panel was moderated by a gentleman named Bertram Hayes Davis, who is the great-grandson of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. And so it really is just fascinating. Billy, I have the program in front of me. I don't want to have people think that it just pertains entirely to people of historical notoriety. Many people from yesteryear in television and cinema attend this festival, as well as others. And so, Billy, I just wanted to read
hit me with the list. Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. First of all, Randy Travis and his wife, the great country singer, is always in attendance. Randy has incurred a lot of bad health in the last few years, and he's unable to perform, but he is always in attendance and there to raise money for his Randy Travis Foundation. But let me go ahead and just read you the list of names. Billy, of course, you remember Fernando Lamas, his son Lorenzo Lamas, who starred on Falcon Crest with Jane Wyman, is always in attendance. Several cast members from the Waltons have made it a point to attend on a regular basis. Michael Learned, if you remember,
Sure.
who was the mother on the Waltons, has taken part in a wonderful theatrical production which they have put on, in which Lorenzo Lamas portrays President Lincoln, Michael Learned portrays Mary Todd Lincoln, and then, and I'm trying to, her name escapes me, Connie Marie Brazelton, an actress who has appeared on ER, also takes part in this wonderful production in which she portrays Mary Todd Lincoln's dressmaker. And just a wonderful event. Just so many wonderful programs to attend. Let me run through the list here for you. Richard Thomas,
Sure.
if you remember from the Wall.
John Boy, yeah.
Allison Arngrim from Little House on the Prairie. And is it okay if I say this on
Sure.
the air, Bill? She has written the most interesting book detailing her life in Hollywood and on Little House. And I believe it is either titled or subtitled "Bitch of the Prairie."
You could say it on this show.
Okay. Dean Butler from Little House, and if you remember, he played the husband of Laura
Yep.
Ingalls. Eric Scott, who played Ben on the Waltons. I'm sure I saw Jason. I saw them all coming in together. And it was the funniest thing, Billy. I felt like I was in a time warp. Here comes Aaron. Here comes Mary Ellen. Here comes Elizabeth. Here comes Jason. Here comes
Right.
Ben. And here comes and then here comes Mother Walton. Mary McDonough, as I mentioned, from Aaron from the Waltons. Judy Norton. Cammie Kotler, who was Elizabeth from the Waltons. I don't know if you guys remember a program back in the 1960s on NBC. Daniel Boone. Well, the boy who played Israel, Darby Hinton, was one of the people who was recognized this year. Lulu Roman from Hee Haw. And if you don't think that's something, sitting next to Lulu Roman from Hee Haw doing a book signing, and then Mary Eisenhower's on the other side of me, I don't know where else in the world we could get those two together.
I think last time you had Joseph Stalin's granddaughter next to her, I think.
It was actually the combination last time, Billy. On one side of me, we had the great grandson of Winston Churchill. We had the son of Nikita Khrushchev, and on the other side of me was Eddie from the Munsters.
I know that for sure because you had him send me an autographed picture, which was very nice.
Right. Oh, wonderful guy. Billy, I've made the comment to people, if you were to walk into a room with 50 or 100 men in their 60s, mid 60s, and if I were to say that Eddie Munster is one of these men, people would go right to it. They would know exactly what it was. Yeah. Okay, so then we had Charlotte Stewart, who played the school marm on Little House on the Prairie. Ginger Alden, who was married to, or not married, rather, but she was the fiance of Elvis Presley. And this was right before Elvis Presley's demise. Chef Roland Messnier, he was a White House pastry chef. Now you'll like this too. And Billy, you're going to have to help me with this because I know that you know a lot about the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
I have to ask Liz, yeah.
You probably have told Liz that Zuzu is in attendance every year. And Zuzu, who lives out in the Northwest, I think she lives in Oregon. A very, very interesting person. Zuzu has helped to put together a foundation and a home, I believe, for runaway young girls. And this home is located either right in Marshfield or in the Marshfield, Missouri vicinity. Just a wonderful humanitarian, just a terrific gal. Well, someone else from that movie is also in attendance, Billy, and maybe you'll be familiar with her. Her name is Janine Roos, and obviously she played one of the children.
Oh, I'll pull it up. You keep going, and I'll pull it up. Janine Roos. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Janine Roos. Okay. Then we had Maggie Peterson Mancuso from the Andy Griffith Show, and I was just flipping the TV around at Dad's the other day, and an episode of Andy Griffith came up, and sure enough, Maggie Peterson Mancuso was right on the screen, and Maggie Peterson Mancuso is the woman, if you remember, the Darling brothers who would come down from the mountain into Maybury. And Maggie Peterson played Charlene Darling,
Oh, sure.
the
Yeah,
Darling boys' sister. And if you remember, the Darling boys never spoke. I mean,
Did they speak this
seemed
time?
like they were kind of well, they weren't there, but she did, and she's wonderful. They had Mary Eisenhower, as I mentioned. I thought this was the funniest thing, one of the most interesting stories, Billy. Prior to coming on, I think I mentioned to you, prior to our program that we had on Thursday morning with Bertram Hayes Davis, the great-great-grandson of Jefferson Davis, I'm doing a signing out in the lobby, vestibule area. And there's an elderly gentleman who's signing autographs, and I didn't really look at him, so I didn't have any idea who he was, but I noticed a young man who was spending a lot of time around him, and I thought, well, that young man looks a lot like this guy. Well, the young man came over, and as it turns out, he works for the Civil War Trust Foundation. He is a photojournalist, and he goes to the various historic sites, Civil War sites around the country, and takes pictures. His work is outstanding. I've had a chance to view many of his pictures since that time. Well, he came up and he was just so nice. He saw the Civil War Fathers book, and we immediately struck up a conversation. And I said to him, I said, I don't know your name. And he said, my name's Greg. And I said, Greg, would you be interested in coming on with us and being a panelist for our symposium that we're going to have on the Civil War? So I told him that Rutherford B. Hayes, his great-granddaughter, would be on, and that we had a distant relative of Mary Todd Lincoln's who was going to be on, in addition to Bertram Hayes Davis and yours truly. He said, well, that's wonderful. He said, let me just go check with my dad to see what's up for the next hour. And as it turned out, Billy, his dad is a gentleman named Ronnie Shell, whom you would remember from Gomer Pyle days. Ronnie Shell is the one who played Duke Slater, Gomer's streetwise buddy, who was often seen in the barracks with him. And Ronnie said to me, that's fine. He said, I can let him go for an hour. And so it was neat. So Greg Shell, Ronnie's son, had a chance to take part in this symposium with us. And it was so neat getting the perspective of someone who, not with a direct Civil War connection, familial connection, but just someone who, as this noted Civil War photographer, someone who's just a devoted Civil War historian, someone extraordinarily interesting to visit with, just did a great job on the panel. And so I'm so glad that Ronnie Shell was there to do a book signing, or rather an autograph session, so that we could procure the services of his son. Some of the other folks who were there, Bill, very interesting speaker, commenced all the festivities on Thursday morning, a woman by the name of Chris Noel. And Liz, are you familiar with Chris Noel? Does that name ring a bell?
No, the only Crystal I can think of is from Dallas, and I never even saw the show. So who is
Okay,
it?
well,
Fill me in.
Chris Noel is someone who was a noted celebrity back in the 1960s. She had very good roles in various Elvis Presley beach movies, but just a very interesting person who was doing some very benevolent causes back in the 1960s on the West Coast, going into some of our different military hospitals and entertaining troops who were returning from Vietnam. And Chris was doing a show, a program for them. Actually, it was something very, very specific, Billy. She was visiting, it wasn't actually a show, but she was visiting multiple amputees, people who had had 2-3 amputations after returning to the States. This was in a hospital in San Diego. She and Sandy Koufax, the great Dodger pitcher, and a couple of other folks were there to try to entertain these individual soldiers as best they could. And she said it was quite the experience, as you can imagine. It was very overcome. And she was talking, and she was telling us about this one gentleman who was 20-year-old guy who was trying to be very, very lighthearted. He saw Sandy Koufax. He said, Sandy, he said, throw me the ball. Sandy had a baseball with him, which he was autographing for different people. And this gentleman had just lost an arm, so he had only one arm with which to catch the ball, and he was devoid of legs. And Sandy threw the ball across the room. He caught it one-handed, and Chris just was really overcome by this Chris Noel. And at that point, Billy, she simply said to herself, I have to do a lot more than simply act. She said, I need to leave this area. And she said, I need to start trying to comfort these men as much as I can and start going to Vietnam. She ended up making 20 different trips to Vietnam. And she was right on the front lines. She wasn't necessarily just entertaining all the time with the different USO folks, but she was actually on the front lines. And she discussed some.
She had a helicopter shot down, didn't she? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was going to mention, Billy. And she detailed that. She had another episode where once getting onto the front lines one morning, we came under the attack by the Viet Cong, and one of our soldiers actually pushed her to the ground and proceeded to lie on top of her, and until the fighting ceased. And she said, she felt so badly because she never had a chance to thank that soldier. And initially, it just all happened. Everything was happening so frenetically that, she said initially, she goes, my gosh, she said, he's ruined my clothes for the whole day. But just, she really was a delight to speak with, and just gave a great presentation with a couple of Vietnam veterans, and you could just tell this wonderful passion that she has that continues to have for these Vietnam veterans, and just was so kind to them, and just did a great job of being able to secure some very poignant thoughts from some folks, I think, who otherwise would have been very reticent. They still were reticent, but she was able to draw from them in a very kind way some words that were very propitious to.
And Tim, how many people were at the festival this year?
As far as celebrities, Bill.
Just people visiting, because it's a fairly small event. I know it's a few thousand, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm going to guess maybe 4,000 or 5,000, probably tops. Yeah, as you say, Billy, it is hard to be able to gauge just how many people are there, because while we had our Civil War symposium, there was something going on in another one of the buildings in town, and the churches open up their, churches are opened up to be able to have these events, and just is a wonderful thing how the community comes together. I think there's a Holiday Inn Express in town, and maybe, I guess a bed and breakfast, and maybe another one in the area, but that's it as far as accommodations. So for all of these people who attend, all of these celebrities, folks are kind enough to put the celebrities up in their homes. And so it just is wonderful, the magnanimity that is shown by the people of this community, and I'm so glad that they are cognizant of what they have, because a lot of times we just don't take advantage in society, Billy, of something that's afforded to us right in our own backyard.
And I mentioned, just grabbing you for a second, Liz, is don't you think, how is it possible that the whole, Time Magazine, I know, doesn't exist like it used to, but how does the whole country not know about this? And it's been going on for 15 years.
Probably because it's good news.
That could be.
Right to the point. Why would we write about something as uplifting as this? No, I think it's just such a shame. And you can just see, in addition to the fact that we'd all be thrilled to see these people and to see the event. What a great example to set for smaller communities all across the country. You can just sort of see these kinds of parades breaking out everywhere, with the right model or the right example. I don't know if you have any good video on it, Tim, but I'm certainly going to, as soon as we're done with the show, I'm going to look it up. But I would be so curious to know if you have any sense if a lot of these folks keep in touch with each other throughout the rest of the year. And by these folks, I'm talking about the, Grover Cleveland's grandson and, the Eisenhower family, just more the political heirs and legacies? Because it's hard to know what kind of relationship any of them had. A lot of them didn't cross at all historically. Some of them were decades apart from, in the service and the time that the families were leading. But or is this a relationship builder too? Do you think?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. Unequivocally, Liz. I see that just in the 3 years that I've attended the festival. Yes, they have bonded. For instance, Dred Scott's great-great-granddaughter, a wonderful gal by the name of Lynn Jackson, does a lot of different events, reconciliatory events, which they have at this festival, with Bertram Hayes Davis, Jefferson Davis's great-great-grandson. And I'm trying to think who else has taken part in their forums. One of the African-American offspring of Thomas Jefferson, when his name escapes me right now, and I am so sorry about that. But
he met one of his kin, right? For the first time, yeah.
Yes. It just so very interesting, Bill. The friendships and Liz that are forged at these events. Let me give you an example. Last year, not this year, but last year when I attended the event, and these folks are very, very fortunate in that the Laura Ingalls Wilder home is in very close proximity to Marshfield. And so when they were trying to find a place for me to stay last year, they put me up at a ranch-style home, which is part of the property of the Laura Ingalls Wilder Association. Well, in addition to having yours truly, they also housed a gentleman named Bill Anderson. You may not recognize that name, but Bill is the preeminent author on Laura Ingalls Wilder. Bill Anderson has written, I'm going to guess, probably in excess of 25 books, most of which surround Laura Ingalls Wilder. Well, he was staying with us, and then a gentleman was brought in, another author who stayed there at that facility, who was a great-great-great-grandnephew of George Washington's. His name is Phil Smucker. Phil does a lot of work for CNN. He also is stationed in Kabul,
I've seen him,
Afghanistan. Yeah. Yes, and Phil is one of our emissaries to the embassy in Afghanistan. And so we had a wonderful time, and we have struck up just a wonderful friendship. Maggie Clark, Billy, that's Rutherford B. Hayes' great-granddaughter. Just a wonderful person. We have kept in touch now over the last couple of years. Her first festival was my first festival. Margaret Carey, the woman whose stills were used for the creation of Tinkerbell in the Walt Disney Studios back in the 1930s. Just a wonderful person by whom I have been befriended. And it is some of the most unique friendships have been forged at this. Just to give you an idea, Billy, if somebody had said to me 20 years ago that you're going to attend a birthday celebration for a noted statesman, I would have thought, well, that seems within the realm of possibility. But here I received a card from Tinkerbell inviting me to her 90th birthday party during the Marshfield Cherry Blossom Festival this year. And I said to her afterwards, I said, Margaret, if someone had told me that I would be spending the 90th birthday party of Tinkerbell's, this year, I don't think I would have ever envisioned that. And so just what's interesting, though, Liz, we get into some wonderful political conversations, in private. Not so much, it's kept pretty light when these folks come together for the forums in which all of the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the presidents appear. That's kept, a little bit lighter. But it's just interesting learning about the different occupations, vocations that some of these folks have today. These folks live very common lives, most of them. They're not living in some, secluded palace somewhere. And so it's very interesting to learn what they are doing as the offspring.
Oh,
of
Tim,
these different
Tim, I should have mentioned
presidents.
before, not to interrupt your stream of thought, but you and Liz have something in common, or you and actually Liz's son. Liz's son works for the Chicago Cubs now, and Liz, Tim
Oh
was
my
a
gosh.
pitching scout for the Cubs. That was your first professional job, right? Your first real job.
Yeah. Yeah, Liz, I scouted for the Cubs back in 1982, 83, 84, and
Oh,
85. And just was a wonderful, wonderful experience. All of those folks are gone from the Cub organization now, but I would love to visit with your son sometime because I'm sure that we would find a lot of interesting commonalities about
oh
which we
gosh,
can
he's
speak.
just feeling so
And
privileged. He graduated from college last year, and he had spent several years actually freelance sports writing for the Boston Herald, and then working on the
yes,
Cape for the Cape Cod Baseball League for one of the teams down there. And as you know, all the
yes,
professional scouts go down to the Cape every summer because it's the elite players from around the country are all there.
oh, one of the preeminent
Right.
collegiate leagues in
And
the
I
country.
think the
Yes,
last or the only surviving wooden bat league. So he worked, and then last summer, right after he graduated from college, he interned for the Chicago Cubs player development folks down on the Cape. So they hired him full time, and he's actually been in Phoenix at the spring training camp, or Mesa there, and he's going to head
yes,
off
yes,
to
amazing. Yes,
Eugene, Oregon, where one of the minor league teams is, the Eugene Emeralds, in a couple of weeks. So he's a
yes.
video associate. You know, so much of this stuff now, as you know, is analytics and data. But he's broadly in the player development group.
The
Yeah,
whole
what
thing.
a world class organization. I love the Cubs. I think Theo's great. I saw John Lester had a killer game last night, so they're having a great. They're in first place this year so far.
You know, it's interesting, Liz. We were under quite a few monetary constraints when I was with the
The polite
Cubs.
way
It
to
was a
say it.
different
They were
organization.
broke.
It wasn't owned by the Ricketts family, and I can guarantee you, Liz, that your son is going to be associated with a winning organization for a long, long, long time. And I hope that he has that association with them as long as he
And Tim,
wants to have it.
Matt Feld is also a political junkie. He comes on this show frequently. He's an amazing handicapper for races. I mean, he has an encyclopedic database in his mind of candidates and electeds. I mean, it's really quite amazing. You could talk to him about a lot of stuff.
It sounds like a Seth
Yeah.
Kennedy, doesn't it? Yeah. It sounds
By the way,
like another Seth
before
Kennedy. Yeah.
can you tell Liz the story? Because I'd love to get into a conversation about this. Liz, the story about the woman that you met at I think I'm going to be in touch with her actually at the Cherry Blossom Festival, who was working at one of the George Washington's homes. Could you tell that story? Because I'd love to get Liz's take on it.
Well, and I would love to have, maybe she could come on as a guest for you at some time, Billy. This is a gal who has worked for the Department of the Interior, for the National Park Services, for a number of years, as a docent at some of the different historic sites. I think I'm going to guess mostly on the East Coast. She recently wrote a book, Liz, pertaining to Eleanor Roosevelt and her relationship with her father, who was considered the black sheep of the Roosevelt family, Elliott Roosevelt, who was actually a very, very kind man, somebody who was very academic, and she gave a presentation at the festival. This gal and Geraldine Hawkins, and it was just a riveting program. She's been featured on CNN, so if or not on CNN rather, but on C-SPAN. So if you were to look up Geraldine Hawkins on C-SPAN, you'd probably be able to see one of her presentations on this particular book. What she was telling me, she was so excited. And Billy, I think we have to preface this by telling you about this. She came over after her presentation, and we were doing a book signing together, and she's looking at one of my placards, and it's the one for Nuns, Nazis, and Notre Dame. And Billy is familiar with the placard because it has one of his uncles, William F. Buckley Jr., on one side of the placard and a picture of his dad on the other. And so she's reading the synopsis of the book, and then looking at the quotations that were given to us by Christopher Buckley, Billy's cousin, and by another of Billy's uncles, his Uncle Jimmy, the former senator. And all of a sudden, this Geraldine looks up at me and she says, "Tim," she said, I know who Gerald O'Reilly was. And she said, I know who Maureen O'Reilly was. Well, Billy, as I say, this woman knows more about the history of the Buckley family than probably three-fourths of your cousins. And she was so excited to be visiting with someone who had the great fortune, which I had, of working, Billy, with your dad for the past 4 years. And so, that was a lead-in to what we ended up talking about later, which pertained to a very unfortunate experience that she had while she was giving a program at the Longfellow home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. For those of you who might not be familiar, the great American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's home also was the site of the origin of the Continental Army when George Washington took command, I believe, in June of 1775. And so, anyway, Geraldine was giving a program at the site pertaining both to George Washington and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And in the course of the conversation, and she does a great way of being able to intertwine the lives of both men and finding commonalities with one who was, a wonderful poet, a wonderful writer, someone with tremendous rhetorical eloquence, and George Washington. So, one of probably our most revered political and military leader in the history of the country. And she was telling about how pleased she was with this particular program. They had a very nice turnout for it that day. And at the conclusion of the program, one of the docents who worked at one of her superiors who worked at that site on a regular basis corrected her, really castigated her on the eloquence that she had afforded to George Washington in her characterization of him. And he said to her, he said, you really shouldn't make the determination yourself that George Washington was such an extraordinary, great human being, because after all, he did own 300 slaves. And she said, if you were to have had an African American in this audience today, that could have posed a real problem. Well, this woman was just dumbstruck by what this superior of hers was saying, and it really, really gnawed at her. And so, Liz, I said to Billy, I said, this is someone who really would like this story revealed, just to demonstrate how far some of the political correctness has gone. I think some of the political correctness is very good, but in this case, I found it appalling. I related the story to Billy. Billy found it equally appalling, and so I think he may be devoting one of his future columns to this unfortunate experience that this Geraldine Hawkins had. Just a wonderful author. You would love having her on your show. So maybe that's something that could be done in the future, because it certainly would. It certainly would fall into the category.
Yeah, but it also fits. It's very timely with. I mean, Washington is now taking a beating. You had the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. Each county committee or local precinct committee has an annual Lincoln Day dinner, and for the Democratic Party, it was always the Jefferson Jackson dinner. And in many states, Jefferson and Jackson have been excommunicated from the Democratic Party, where they no longer honor them. And now it's Washington's turn. I mean, Washington has taken the beating. You even had somebody, I think, a couple of years ago suggest that that Washington D.C. the name be changed. Good luck with that. But just lately, Washington's been getting crushed. I mean, it's bananas. Liz, we've talked about this, I think, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. All of the above. Yes, they're getting crushed. So,
Bill, I would love to read her letter to you verbatim.
I think we're actually going to have a time constraint on that. We've only got a couple minutes left.
Yeah. So but let me just say this. This goes into the conversation that we've had, and that I had with the opportunity of speaking with Geraldine Hawkins again the other night. Just thinking about how most of these people who profess to be historians, quote unquote, view history from a sociological perspective. They don't look at it from an anthropological perspective. They're not looking at history fairly when we really think about how we should look at it as a social science. Now, how can you equate someone living in the late 18th century living today under the same value?
Tim, I can't even look at my haircuts from the 1980s. You know,
what's
that thinking?
The hypocrisy is beyond belief. Just look at the governor of Virginia, the blackface thing, the whole.
Yes.
I just find this righteousness is just absolutely absurd, and you're not allowed to talk about context ever, right? So you talk about anthropological. It's exactly what you're saying is look at the context, and which is the right way to look at it, and the legitimate way to look at it. And these guys, that party just cherry picks. Just the fact that they think they have any leg to stand on that stuff is a joke.
Liz, isn't it something that, as the more that I think about this, what an affront to African Americans for this person to say, "Well, what would have happened if we had an African American in the audience that day?"
Yeah.
What an affront to African Americans saying
as though African Americans can't understand history as well. I mean, right?
Exactly. That irked me so much. Irked isn't the right word, but yeah. Anyway, any of you folks who are out there, Bill, just getting back to the festival, I hope folks have a chance to attend this. I don't know if the people of Marshfield will be so magnanimous as to open their homes to guests from New York.
Oh, I'm sure.
Going, but
we're awfully nice, yeah.
But they can always stay in Springfield,
right?
Which is in close proximity. So, guys, I thank you so much for having me. I as you can tell, I'm not the most articulate person in the world. I don't possess the rhetorical eloquence that you folks do. You do this on a regular basis. And so it's such a treat for me. It's such a kick to be able to come on.
I'm still looking up half your words, Tim. And by the way, Jeannie Roos was if you remember in It's a Wonderful Life, there was the blonde woman that was always kind of had a sweet tooth for Jimmy Stewart. Jeannie Roos played her when she was young, when she was little in the candy shop. She was always flirting with a young Jimmy Stewart in that movie. So that's who that was.
Okay. Now, she has her doctorate, Billy, and I'm not sure.
But I think actually we are running out of time because I think the music is about to come back on in about 15 seconds. But
your book on nuns, Nazis in Notre Dame. Anyone, you can buy it on Amazon. There's my shameless plug. It's the most delightful story about the most exceptional man, Billy's father, Gerald O'Reilly, and it's timeless. Actually, it's timeless, and it was a great gift. And he was way too humble to ever tell his story on his own. So I'm so grateful to you for putting pen to paper and actually sharing so many great things about his life. Going all the way back to his very earliest days in Brooklyn, so it really is. He was a world class mensch American, and I hope people just take the time to go online, order it, and you can read it in a night. It's just fantastic.
Great,
Liz. You really have summarized Jerry's character. I never met a person like
Tim.
Jerry in my entire life. And to be able to spend those 4 years with him, and of course this was all because of Billy. Billy opened up this opportunity for me. I can't think of a better way to spend 4 years. For those folks who never met Jerry O'Reilly, they can't quite understand that. I think they'll understand it better when they read the book, but I mean that. He was the most remarkable person I ever had the opportunity to visit. Thank you, Billy.
Majesties. But now wait a minute.